Hi everyone, welcome. Hope everything's going well with these slides. A lot of the slides content talks about the relational algebra behind the select and the from clauses that we're looking at here, but I wanted to give a very broad overview of how you can use SQL and pgadmin to code inside of your environment and what you might be seeing, such as operations that we'll do between two tables. So the main thing I wanted to mention here is on page 9 of your slides. It talks a bit about domain types. Inside of pgadmin, there's like 20 more as well. So there's a lot of domain types. Don't feel the need that you have to memorize all of them, as some of them are pretty explanatory in what they're doing. But essentially, just be aware that we have different types of data and to be aware of what you're going to be using for them. You're most likely going to be using character or variable character and a mixture of numeric or floating points, as a lot of our data is either in string format or a number. And the difference between character and n is that we have a fixed character length. So if you make a column that says character of 10, it's going to expect a string of 10 items in it. With variable character, that's a variable length, so it can go from 0 up to n. And then again, with your numeric, you could have a point number with user precision of p digits, with d digits to the right of the decimal point. So essentially, this would be where you can have 3 digits to the left, excuse me, and then up to 5 to the right, or excuse me, up to 1 on the right, because we have our 1 here. So a lot of these, you don't need to memorize them. A lot of the domain types are kind of fundamental, but as you walk around, or excuse me, as you mess around with these, you might figure out some more. Okay. So what I actually wanted to show here is how we can actually start to create these tables. A lot of the code that you're given here, for example, this create table instructor, you could actually copy and paste it inside of your pgadmin. One more thing is if your pgadmin environment where I'm using it here isn't helping, or it's not giving you, it's just being annoying, you could also do this code inside of a REPL online, where I showed in the previous video, or the SQL coding environment of your choosing. But if you prefer pgadmin because we installed it too, that's good as well. One more thing before I delve into this is how I actually got here is from your main database. I made one called data practice. Go into your databases, go into your Postgres, go down to schemas, and schemas are what we might have for the public or not public, but essentially a public facing one is where we have our data. And then you can go ahead and hit on the public one. And then eventually inside of your public schema, you could go ahead and take a right click and hit query tool. And this will bring you up to a type of table or an SQL coding environment similar to what I have here. Okay. So right now, I actually have 2 tables provided for me. And I'm going to show you briefly how to delete them and also, oops, let me see here, how to create them as well. So don't worry right now if this is unfamiliar to you. See here. Some of the SQL coding language is straightforward in the sense where drop table means remove the table, or cascading environments through it too. But one more thing about deleting is that once you get into deleting tables that have types of connections between them or a foreign referencing key, it gets a little bit more tricky. But for now, we're doing very basic work. So the most fundamental thing that we could say here is I want to make a table, and let's just create a table called instructor. Okay. So what I say here is usually in SQL, I'm going to give it a command on what to do. So I want to create, and then you're going to be asked, what do you want to create? So we're going to say table, and then you provide it your table name. Your table name is going to be what pops up here. My thing didn't refresh, so I have a create table instructor. And if I run this here, oops, let me put my 2 guys here. So usually after our instructor name, we're going to have to put 2 parentheses for it there, because that's where we have our attributes, as we saw in our construct down here. We can give it our attribute names. Right now, I just created a blank table with no attribute names. And if I want to see what's inside of my table, I can go ahead and use something called a select clause. A select is essentially where you're telling SQL, go ahead and get something for me from this table. And there's a few different ways. When we look at the attributes later, we're going to get more specific about what we're selecting. But if we use this keyword of an asterisk, that means select all attributes or everything. Okay. So after you say what you want to select from it, we're going to say the clause from. And again, if we go back to our relational algebra, this is kind of like the pi sign. It's hard for me to draw it out there, but this is our predicate, right? We're going to be selecting, remember in our relational algebra, we had like department.id, etc. We could say any by using this asterisk. And where do we want to select it from? Well, we created a table called instructor. And I'm going to finish each of my syntax lines with a semicolon. So this is similar to Java or C if you use this as well. If I run this guy, I actually got a successful run down here, but you'll notice that nothing pops up for me, right? Because it's an empty table. So what I'm going to do one more time here is actually drop my table instructor just so that I don't have any issues with recreating it. So if I create a table instructor and try to add attributes into it later, I'll have to use something different called alter. But right now, let's just try to create a basic table. And so what I'm going to say here, take a look here. Oops. Similar to what we have over here for our instructor, the way this works is that we have our name of our attribute we want to create, the domain type of our attribute, and then an N if we need it as well. I'm going to keep this pretty simple, similar to the name. So I'm just going to say create a table with the attribute name. I'm going to have a variable character, and I'll say 20 for it. Now, if I only have one attribute, I don't do anything else, and I can run this code, and it will create a single column database for me. However, if I want to have more than that, I could say something like email, 20 here. I can also say something maybe like salary. And let me put the salary as, instead of an integer, we could do something like numeric as well. So I could also type out integer and int and numeric here. I'll just do something similar to what we have here. Maybe they're a bit more high paying over here, so I'll do 10. But essentially, the 2 right here is for the decimal or pennies that we have, right? So we can only go up to 2 decimal places, okay? So essentially, this is your format for creating a table. So I'm going to create a table, the ID, name, email, salary. Let's also kind of do the department name here, just so that we're similar to the to our actual coding, or excuse me, to our slides. One more thing too, you'll notice, we could try to run this, is that my var characters are all capital except for this one. This one isn't capital either. So if I try running this, let's see if I get any errors. So I don't get any errors, so you don't need to worry about case sensitivity. You could also might be able to do it this way too, but typically var character is capital, but if you just want to be consistent, just apply that to your coding, okay? So now I could say here, cool. So this is a bit different now, right? So now I have select from instructor. I have my name, email, department name, and salary. Let's go ahead and do some basic insertion now. Let's do insert some mock data. And again, these SQL files will be saved for you at the end of it, but these videos are for you to use to build up. So if you prefer just looking at the end product, you could skip and scroll around the SQL code. Or if you like building them up with me, that works too. Cool. So what I'm going to try to show you here is how we can actually insert stuff into our table. Let me see this here. And what we're going to do is we're going to insert, the keyword insert again, into, and where are we going to insert into? We're going to want to insert into instructor. And what we could say here, let's try it this way. I'm just going to put myself here. I'll just do CS, and then I'm still a grad student, so it's not too high. Let's just do, I'll make it up. I'll make myself very rich. Okay, I wish. So let's go ahead and see if this guy runs for us here. So one thing that you'll notice, I'll just say I did this here, is that I have a string over here of 80,000, but if I went back up to my salary, I had a numeric value of my salary, right? So what the error I'm getting down here, it says error, invalid syntax. I don't think, let me try to see if I can, make my text a little bigger. I'll do that later for it. Essentially, it says invalid syntax for type numeric, and then it says line one. So essentially, because I'm only highlighting and running this, if I ran it this way from the top, it would execute my entire script. But I just highlighted where I want to run, and I'm hitting play. It's giving me an error of I have a wrong data type essentially. One more thing you'll notice is I have a character of 55 in the SQL state, so you can use these two down here to figure out some more errors. To simply fix this up, I'm going to put an 80,000 like here, and let's just see if this guy runs for us. Cool. So we say insert 01, query returned successfully, and if I highlight my select clause again, I can go ahead and I can make this here a salary value, okay? Now, if I wanted to do one more interesting thing here, let's just say that I don't want to have any decimal places here. Let's just say the salary is a solid number for whatever it is. We could do something where we could say alter table. And I'm going to give you the instructor name. So I'm saying alter my table called instructor. And I can either do a few different scenarios here. So we can add a column, delete a column, or drop a column is kind of what it's called here because we used drop earlier. Drop and delete can be synonymous, but drop is the keyword we're going to use, or modify a column. Okay, so really when we're doing an alter table at this higher level, these are kind of the only things that you're wanting to do here. I could say something where I'm going to get rid of my department name for it. So alter table instructor, drop, this is my keyword there, column. Column's another keyword inside of our coding environment. And again, this database coding language was built with the syntax of operating on tables in mind. So it uses these types of keywords. And what you could see here is I'm going to alter the table instructor, drop column department name. Let's see if this runs for us. Alter table, query returns successfully in 47 milliseconds. And let's try to run it again. And my department name column is gone, okay? One more thing that we could try to do here is try to add back into column. You usually wouldn't want to do this because you just dropped it. But we could say add column, and let me say I don't want to use underscores here. I just wanted to call the department, or excuse me, I wanted to just add in a column called department. And what we could say here is I'm adding in one department. I'm going to add a column called department. We might face an issue here if we try to run this, and let's see what that issue might be. So when we get this error, syntax error at or near to semicolon, we get a line that says alter table instructor add column department. It's just giving me back the code I made. Sometimes our error statements aren't the best at telling us what's happening. We might be able to get some information too. But again, you have to remember that when we're making our table and we're making these attribute names, we have to know what the type or our domain type of our attributes are. So the error that we're getting here is that we don't want a blank type of, we can't have an attribute inside of our table that doesn't have an attribute type, right? So I could say something, department name, and I could say varchar of 20. Let's see if this fixes our issue. Great, so my alter table worked. And then if I run this, oops, sorry, wrong one. If I run this one here, you can see here, I can get a department and I have something of null inside of it, right? Because I didn't really add in my data. And now what I could do is go ahead and grab back in my insert into. One thing you might notice though is we just did the same code from earlier. You might try to check here. Let's just try running this code again. You'll see here that I get an input syntax for type numeric CS. So what I'm trying to get at for everyone here is that when you're modifying these columns and altering them, the state that the columns are created is important. The order is important. SQL isn't smart enough to know, oh, you were doing this earlier, so you want to insert it here. So what this means is that because I dropped my department here, my salary became my third attribute after I did this code here. Now I added in another attribute. Now my department is my fourth attribute after it, which you could see down here. So what we're going to need to do is actually change our 80K around and put the CS right after it. Now, if I try running this code, I get the insert into one just fine. Cool. And now there's two versions of me. Let's see it here. We could try to delete some information with the drop command one more time. So I could do drop table instructor. Sorry, just double check my notes. And then if I run this one here, we see that our drop command works to remove it. And if I select everything from instructor again, we can see we get this new error that says instructor doesn't exist. So then I can go back and create it all over again, and we'll be with a blank slate here. Okay. So this is a very rudimentary look at the adding, the dropping of a column, and the modification. Oh, one sec. I forgot to modify my column. Let me try one more time instead of inserting twice here. We did an insert. So this is our drop command. Oops, sorry. This one is our add command. And let's do a modify command. So we could say something. We could say alter table instructor. And we could say alter. So alter is the other word that we're using, column. And what it's going to ask for is our, we could see down here we have department character varying 20. So I'm going to hit department name. And again, I haven't ran the drop the column yet for here, so we're still based on this one. But let's just say that I have some huge department names that are like 50 characters long, and my 20 doesn't work for it. I could go ahead. Sorry. I could say something like set. Let's see if this guy works for us here. Believe text is one of them. Okay. So what I said out here is to alter table instructor, alter my column, set the data type of department name to text. Let's see if this guy works for us here. Something looks like it worked here. So if I go ahead and I try to run my instructor, you can see now that text is my data type. One more way we can look at this is that if I change this to 50 and I rerun my code here, I get my alter table and I have to run this guy one more time. Character varying of 50. Okay. One more way that we can do this here, there's a few other operations we can look at. We're usually changing the data type in specific. Another way that we could do this is alter table instructor. Let's see here. Instead of the, let's see if it's alter. We could say something like rename column, department name to department. Now, some of these keywords might be coming out of nowhere for us as well, but eventually with our notes and when you're going through this, some of these are kind of straightforward. So the rename operation is telling us to do a rename on something there for us. Let's try to see if this works for us. It looks like our alter table was successful. And if I run this guy here, we'll see that we go from department to department name. So now I don't need to do my add and drop again and change up my whole data structure there. I can simply do the alter. All right. Cool. Let's do, let's do CS as well. Now, if I run insert into this guy, daisy, we'll see from earlier that we had our issue where they were flipped. So now what I'm going to do is just put this guy back here. And let's try to run this one. This insert worked. Let's go ahead and see if this one worked for us too. Let me do my select all from instructor. Cool. So now I have two rows inside of my table, and it looks like I have my numeric 40K, 80K, and I have my two people here. And now if I run my select all, that will get me it, okay? So this is kind of another way to do these create table constructs and these select. The updates that we can do, there's also this copy update that you can see later in the other code where we looked at copying into an Excel file is where we saw this too. But in general, um, the slides are good to show you all these different commands as well. But the more you just kind of fiddle around with SQL, and the more you're like, okay, how do I actually rename a column? You could just type in SQL rename column as well. So don't worry about trying to memorize. Like you're not going to be tasked with what is the exact syntax to rename a column. You're more so going to be asked, oh, we need to shift around this table. Can you show some code on how to do it? And you'll really just get good at knowing what to type in or search for if you're missing it too. Okay. So don't worry about memorizing the syntax. More so, try to memorize how this actually works and the kind of order of operations that you do, right? So it's a command, first of all, what you want to do. You're going to specify where you kind of want to do it. And then it's, of course, your table name and then what you want to do with that command as well. Okay, cool. So again, this is a very brief introduction. In the next video, we'll take a look at making a second table, probably a student table, and seeing how they correlate. But if you feel pretty confident about this one, any more information could be found in the slides too. Great work, everyone.